Let me tell you about the Jamaican night. Not the one you have seen in the photographs. Not the one the travel boards sell you. The warm amber glow of torches along a resort beach. The blue-lit shimmer of a hotel pool. The softened dark that exists only to frame a cocktail at the edge of the Caribbean Sea. That is not the night I am talking about. The night I am talking about is the one that begins when you are 4 miles outside of Magadi in St. Elizabeth, or on the back road from Chapelton into the hills of Clarendon, or moving through the mountains between Buff Bay and the parishes beyond in Portland, and the last vehicle you saw passed you going the other direction 20 minutes ago, and the moon, if the moon is even out tonight, is doing no more than suggesting shapes rather than illuminating them, and the only sounds in the whole enormous dark are the tree frogs, which are constant and pulsing like a living heartbeat in the bush on either side of the road, and the cane fields, if there are cane fields, moving in the wind with a sound that is not quite whispering and not quite sighing, but something between the two that your nervous system reads, instinctively and correctly, as a sound that is trying to tell you something you may not want to hear. That night, the real Jamaican night, the one that has been accumulating itself for 300 years. Because you have to understand something about the land in Jamaica, about the specific quality of soil and road and hillside in a place where what happened. There are places in the world where the ground is simply ground, mineral and organic matter, rock and root, the physical substrate of ordinary geography. And then there are places where the ground is something else, where the earth has held so much, absorbed so much, been the witness to so much weight, that it cannot, even across centuries, entirely release what it has been made to contain. The roads through the old cane country are those roads. The plantation tracks that are now paved over with asphalt, but are still, underneath the asphalt, exactly what they always were. Those tracks know something. The path between the quarters and the great house. The road the overseer rode at night, enforcing the curfew, making the darkness itself into a weapon of control. The ground where the blood went in. That ground does not simply forget because the century changed and the legal structures changed and the people living on it now have different names and different rights. The ground remembers. And in Jamaica, the old people will tell you, have always told you, will tell you tonight if you ask them the right way, that when the memory in the ground becomes too heavy, when the weight of what was done on those roads becomes too much for even the soil to contain in silence, it rises. It takes a shape. It gathers itself up out of the charged dark, and it comes to the road. And the shape it takes, most often, the specific shape that the Jamaican earth has chosen for 300 years of accumulated grievance and unresolved wickedness, is the shape of a massive black bull, bigger than any natural animal, darker than the dark it moves through, with 2 eyes like burning coal and a chain dragging behind it on the road. And the sound of that chain is the first thing you will know of it, coming toward you through the night, long before you can see anything, long before those fire eyes crest whatever rise or bend separates you from what is coming. The sound comes first. Always the sound comes first. Remember that. It matters. Now let me tell you exactly what it is, in the order that the old people always described it. The way you would describe something you have seen and have spent the years since trying to find language for. The size first. Because the size is the first thing that tells you that you are not looking at anything that belongs to the natural world. A bull is a large animal. A bull is an animal that makes a person feel small in the ordinary way that large animals do. But the rolling calf is not large in that ordinary way. It is large in the way that certain things are large in dreams, with a quality of wrongness to the scale, a sense that the dimensions have been decided by something other than biology or physics, that whatever rules govern the size of living things did not apply here, were not consulted here, are not relevant here. Bigger than any bull you have ever stood beside. Bigger than the space it is moving through seems capable of containing. It takes up the road. It takes up the dark on either side of the road. It is a presence before it is a shape. The color. The rolling calf is black. But not black the way a dark night or a black coat or a shadow is black. It is black the way a thing is black that has never had any relationship with light whatsoever, the specific total black of a place the light has never reached and cannot reach, and has perhaps forgotten exists. It does not reflect. It does not shimmer. It absorbs. Looking at it, the old people say, is like trying to look at a hole that has been cut in the fabric of the night itself. A darkness deeper than the dark surrounding it, defined only by what its edges displace, by the way it moves through space, and the space rushes to close behind it, and cannot quite manage to close cleanly. That is the color of the rolling calf. It is the color of something that absorbs rather than reflects. The color of something that only takes. And the eyes. The eyes are not red. People who have not heard the stories correctly will tell you the eyes are red, but the people who actually tell the stories, the people who carry the tradition in their bodies, are specific. Not red. Deep orange. The specific deep orange of burning coal at the center of its heat. The color of fire when it has moved past yellow and orange into the place where the combustion is most complete and most intense, where the fire is doing its truest and most absolute work. Two of them, steady, not flickering, not wavering, steady and unwavering the way a lantern is steady when there is no wind to move it. Except these are not lanterns made of glass and flame. These are eyes made of whatever is on the other side of death for a person who spent their living years setting fire to everything they touched. They burn through the dark the way a hatred burns through years of ordinary time. Steadily, reliably, without exhausting themselves. The nostrils. Smoke. Specifically sulfurous smoke. The smell that the living body reads as warning before the conscious mind has processed it. The smell of somewhere the living are not meant to go and have perhaps, in some earlier life of the species, been trained by consequence to stay away from. The rolling calf breathes out the smell of its own damnation, and you will smell it before you see the fire eyes, as a final warning. The chain comes first, then the smell, then the eyes. The tradition is specific about the order. The tradition is specific about so many things, and the specificity is not accidental. The specificity is the point. And the chain. The chain deserves its own meditation, because the chain is not incidental to the rolling calf. The chain is the meaning of the rolling calf, made audible and visible and dragged through the physical world for anyone with ears to hear. Heavy iron links. Old iron. The kind of iron that was forged in a century when iron was the material of bondage, when iron links and iron collars and iron ankle cuffs were the technology of a system that converted human beings into units of agricultural production, and you could tell how that system thought about the people it had converted by the weight of the iron it used to bind them. That iron, dragging on the road, on asphalt now, on the tarmac that covers the plantation track that used to be dirt, and before that was nothing but the compressed earth of 10,000 feet going where they were told to go. The sound of that chain on that road, the clank and drag and scrape and grind of it, is a sound that enters the body before it enters the mind. It does something to the blood. The old people say you know that sound before you have ever heard it, because it is a sound the people who came before you knew, and the body carries what the mind has been allowed to forget. Imagine walking on that road in St. Elizabeth at 2 in the morning. The dance is done. You have perhaps drunk a little rum. You are not afraid. You are a grown person. You have walked this road 100 times. You do not believe in every story the old women tell under the breadfruit tree in the afternoon. The tree frogs are loud, and you are thinking about the woman you danced with, and the way home is dark, but it is a familiar dark, and then you hear it. Not yet behind you, and not yet in front of you, but somewhere in the dark that has no clear direction at that distance. In the dark that the sound is traveling through before you can triangulate its origin, the chain, the first sound of it. Now, what are you? What kind of person are you now, on that road, with that sound in the air? Let me tell you what the rolling calf is, where it comes from, what it has earned itself, before we go further into the road with you. Because you cannot understand the encounter without understanding the entity. And you cannot understand the entity without understanding the specific category of human wickedness that produces it. The old people in Jamaica. The ones who carry the Duppy tradition in its full form, not the simplified version but the real architecture of it, are very specific about the origin of the rolling calf. They do not say it is a demon. They do not say it is a devil. They do not say it is something that arrived from outside the human story to make the human story worse. They say something much more precise and much more damning than any of that. They say it is the Duppy, the spirit of a wicked person. And not just any kind of wickedness. The wickedness of sufficient concentrated quality will produce variations of this creature across the tradition. Most specifically, most persistently, with the kind of consistency across tellings that tells you this is not decoration but doctrine. They say it is the spirit of a cruel butcher. Not just a butcher, a cruel one. There is a distinction the tradition is making, and the distinction matters enormously. The person who kills animals to feed people, who performs that necessary and difficult labor with the understanding that it is labor, that it carries moral weight, that the animal's life is a real thing being ended for a real purpose. That person is doing something the community understood and did not condemn. The tradition is not vegetarian. The tradition is not naive. Life feeds on life, and the people who live closest to the land know that better than anyone. That butcher is not who the rolling calf was. The rolling calf was the other kind, the kind who enjoyed it, who enjoyed the specific quality of power that came from being the one holding the knife over the thing that could not escape, who savored the moment before the cut, not out of any ritual seriousness, but out of pleasure, out of the particular category of pleasure that belongs to people who have confused domination with dignity, who looked at the animal's helplessness and felt themselves enlarged by it, and who brought that same orientation, that same savoring of power over the powerless, into every other transaction of their life, who weighed the meat falsely, the scale's thumb press so practiced it had become unconscious, who looked into the faces of the poor women buying scraps to stretch across a week's meals for their children and felt, in that looking, the specific contempt of a person who has confused material advantage with moral superiority, who used the knife, in the tradition's darkest tellings, for more than animals. That person dies. The body stops. The breath leaves. The family gathers. The service is held. The hymns are sung. And in the European theological tradition, that would be the end of the earthly story. The soul goes somewhere else, heaven or hell, and the earth is done with it. But in the Jamaican tradition, which is not the European tradition and was never meant to be, the soul does not simply leave. The soul carries the weight of what it was. And a soul that has been built, choice by choice, cruelty by cruelty, over an entire lifetime, into a specific shape, does not stop being that shape because the body that housed it has ended. It keeps the shape. It carries it. And the shape of a man who spent his life treating living things as instruments of his own pleasure and his own power, who looked at vulnerability and saw an invitation, who wore his cruelty so completely and for so long that it became the whole architecture of what he was. The shape of that man, in death, is not a man. The form of a man is too dignified for what he has earned. He comes back as the thing he most resembled in life, as a beast, with fire in his eyes because his cruelty was a kind of burning that never went out, with chains because the chains he put on others, spiritually, in the violence he enacted, in some cases literally, are now on him, and now they drag on the road, and now the sound of them is the warning he never gave the things he hurt. And now let me say what the tradition knows, but does not always say plainly. Because in Jamaican storytelling, the deepest things are often carried inside the story rather than announced above it. The rolling calf is not only the cruel butcher. That is where the tradition focuses its most intimate, personal, human-scaled moral accounting. But underneath the story of the butcher, underneath the story of the individual wickedness that earns this particular damnation, there is a larger figure. There is the plantation. You cannot tell the rolling calf correctly without the plantation. You cannot understand what the chain means without remembering what iron was used for on this island for 300 years. You cannot understand why the sound of hooves in the darkness of a Jamaican road produces the specific quality of dread it produces without understanding that for generations of Jamaican people, the sound of hooves in the dark was not the sound of an animal. It was the sound of authority. It was the sound of the overseer riding the night road, enforcing the curfew, making sure that no enslaved person moved between the hours of darkness without permission, and making the penalty for that movement legible through violence that left marks in the body and marks in the community's collective memory that no generation's forgetting could fully erase. The overseer who rode those roads. The plantation manager who woke the morning with a count of bodies and a calculation of productivity and a list of infractions to be addressed with the specific administrative vocabulary of brutality that the plantation developed and refined across generations. The man for whom the suffering of other human beings was not a moral problem, but a management tool, who used fear as the primary technology of labor control, who made the night itself dangerous because the night was the only time the enslaved had anything resembling freedom, and therefore the night had to be made into a punishment in advance, a space of terror that contained its own enforcement. That man, what does he become after death? The tradition's answer is this. He becomes the thing he was. He becomes the terror in the road. He becomes the sound of hooves and iron in the dark. He becomes the rolling calf, and the rolling calf haunts the same roads he patrolled in life, on the same night ground. And the people who must walk those roads now hear the chain coming and feel in their bodies something older than their own experience. The specific frequency of fear that their ancestors tuned to that sound and passed down through generations in the way that certain knowledges are passed, not through language, but through the body itself, through the blood's response, through the way the hair rises on the arms before the mind has finished processing what the ears have heard. This is what the old people understood and what the tradition encoded. The folklore did not invent a new kind of monster for the plantation. It looked at the existing monster, the overseer, the cruel wielder of power over the powerless, the man who made himself into a terror, and simply described what happened to him on the other side of death. Not heaven and hell in the theological sense imported from Europe and applied with all the colonial implications that import carried. Something more precise, something more local, something more immediate and more just than an abstracted afterlife sorted by a deity operating on someone else's moral schedule. The tradition said, you become what you chose to be. You become it fully, permanently, stripped of the human form that gave you cover in life. You walk the roads that remember you, dragging what you put on others, and the people you made afraid in life can now, if they know what they are doing, make you afraid in turn. That is the transmutation. That is the specific genius of it. The monster is not from outside. The monster is from inside. The monster is the man who made himself monstrous, revealed at last in his true form. Now, where does the rolling calf go? Not everywhere. This is important. The tradition is specific about the geography of the rolling calves haunting the way it is specific about everything that matters. It does not haunt settled places. It does not walk through town at midday or pace the yard of a family compound or move through the market on a Saturday morning. It haunts the in-between places, the long stretches of country road between one village and the next. The plantation tracts that are no longer maintained but still exist if you know how to read the landscape. The old cane roads overgrown now with guinea grass and wild tamarind, but still traceable, still known to the ground, still carrying whatever the ground carries. The edge places. The places that are neither here nor there. Neither the relative safety of community nor the absolute exposure of open country. The cane fields at the boundary of settled land, where the last house's light stops making any difference and the dark reasserts its full authority. And, most powerfully, most dangerously, most essentially, the crossroads. The crossroads in the Jamaican Duppy tradition, and in the African-derived spiritual traditions that run like a subterranean river through the entire Caribbean diaspora, through Vodou and Candomblé and Santeria, and all the traditions that survived the Middle Passage by going underground, and staying alive in the forms that power could not reach. The crossroads is not simply a place where two roads intersect. It is a liminal space, a place that belongs to neither direction and therefore belongs to the things that travel between directions, between states, between the living and the dead. A place where the membrane between worlds is thin, where what cannot be seen in ordinary space becomes momentarily visible, where the energies that the living world keeps in separate compartments leak into each other. The rolling calf is most powerful at the crossroads. And also, the crossroads is where certain protections work that do not work anywhere else. Both things are true. Both things have always been true. The tradition does not simplify this. The tradition says, this is the most dangerous place, and also the place where you have the most power. The crossroads is both. And what you do when you get there is everything. This geography maps directly onto the social geography of plantation Jamaica. The lonely road between villages was the road the enslaved walked after curfew, knowing that to walk it was already a crime. The overseer patrolled that road. The rolling calf haunts that road. The crossroads was the place you could not afford to linger, the place where you were most visible and most exposed. And now the crossroads is also the place where the Duppy can be confused, where the spirit that pursues you might be stopped. The geography of danger has become the geography of folk protection. The folklore took the same spaces that the plantation made terrifying and made them, with the right knowledge, survivable. It is not an accident. It is a direct response, a transformation of the terrain of oppression into a terrain where the knowledge of the oppressed has value, where knowing the old stories is not nostalgia, but survival technology. Let me tell you about the man from St. Elizabeth. This is one of the stories the old people tell, and I am going to tell it the way it has been told, which is to say, slowly, with attention paid to the things that matter and time taken with the moments where the tension lives, because a story told too fast is a story that doesn't respect itself or the people who kept it alive. The man is coming home from a dance. It is late, past midnight, closer to 2. He is not drunk, or not entirely. He has drunk the way a man drinks at a dance, enough to feel himself a little larger than ordinary life, a little less subject to ordinary concerns. He has danced. He has talked to people. He is in the warm aftermath of community, the specific happiness of a person returning home from a good night among their own people. And the road is familiar. He has walked this road more times than he can count, in daylight and in dark, in his childhood and his manhood, and he is not afraid of it. He is, if anything, a little proud of not being afraid. He knows the stories. He has heard them his whole life. He just does not quite believe them. Not fully. Not with the bone-deep conviction that the old people carry. He believes them the way a person believes in lightning before a storm has started. Theoretically, at a comfortable distance from the actual phenomenon. He hears the chain. Not behind him, or not only behind him. It is the way sound works on a dark country road. The way it travels and reflects and seems to come from several directions at once so that you cannot be sure, initially, which direction the danger is coming from. The clank of it, the drag, the pause and clank again. Iron on stone, iron on asphalt. A rhythm that has no natural animal rhythm in it. A cadence that nothing with 4 legs produces when it moves. Something that is neither the sound of a living animal nor the sound of a machine, but the sound of something that partakes of both those qualities without being reducible to either. He stops walking. That is the first thing. He stops, because the body makes that decision before the man has made it. The body says, this requires stillness. The body says, assess before you move. He stands in the road, and he listens, and the chain sound does not stop. It is getting louder with that particular quality of loudness that means the source of the sound is moving toward you through the dark rather than the sound simply expanding into the night air. It is coming closer. It is coming to him. He still does not run, because he is the kind of man who does not run, or who does not want to be the kind of man who runs, and because some part of him, the part that has been carrying the comfortable skepticism of a man who has lived his whole life without direct encounter with the thing the old people warn about, is still offering rational explanations. A truck, perhaps, with something dragging. Or a dog, though a dog's chain sounds nothing like this, and some part of him knows that. He stands in the road, and he does not run, and then he turns around. The fire eyes are closer than they should be. That is the first thing he will say later when he tells this story. Not that he saw something terrifying, but that the distance was wrong. That in the time between when he first heard the chain and when he turned around and looked, the thing had covered more ground than the sound had accounted for. The fire eyes are right there, or near enough to right there that the word closer barely captures it. Two burning points of deep orange in the dark. Steady, unwavering, fixed on him with an attention that has the specific quality of the attention of something that has been waiting, not searching, not wandering, but waiting specifically for exactly this. For him on this road at this hour with this much rum courage and this much skepticism about to be corrected. He runs. The skepticism is gone. The self-image of the man who does not run is gone. He is running and the chain is getting louder, which means the thing is keeping pace or perhaps accelerating, which means the distance is not increasing as fast as his legs are moving, which means his legs are not going to be sufficient. He knows this. Some part of him, even in the full animal terror of running, knows this, and this is the part of him that saves him. The part that does not abandon thought even in extremity, that reaches back through the fear and finds the story, the old story, the one the grandmother told, and the one that the older men told by the rum bar, and the one that he heard so many times he thought he had stopped hearing it. He knows what to do. He does not want to do it, but he knows. He throws himself into the ditch, off the road, down into the drainage ditch, and he presses himself as flat as he can go, his face in the dirt, his arms flat at his sides, making himself as small and low and horizontal as the earth will allow him to be. And with his hands, moving in the dark with the specific speed of a person who is very afraid but has not lost their intelligence, he strips off his shirt and throws it. Not in front of him, not behind him. He throws it at an angle, across the road, into the bush on the far side. The shirt goes one way. His scent goes with the shirt. He goes flat in the ditch, and he does not breathe, and he presses his face into the dirt of Jamaica, and he waits. The chain passes him. The fire eyes, he cannot see them from the ditch, has his face in the earth, will not look up. The fire eyes pass. He hears the chain cross the road at the angle where his shirt went. He hears it pause. He hears the sound of the chain on the far side of the road, moving into the bush where the shirt landed. He hears the sound of his own heartbeat, which is louder than the tree frogs, which is louder than the wind in the cane. He stays in the ditch. He does not get up when the chain sound seems to have moved away. He stays in the ditch until the sky begins to change, until the first suggestion of gray comes at the edge of the eastern hills that tells him the dark is retreating, that the morning is beginning its reliable displacement of everything that belongs to the night. Only then does he get up, without his shirt, without his dignity on that particular road on that particular night, but walking, upright, toward home, a changed kind of man, or perhaps more accurately a man who has arrived at a knowledge he had been holding at a distance his whole life and can now no longer pretend he does not possess. Let me tell you about the woman at the edge of her yard. She is a different kind of story, not the story of someone who nearly lost and survived by cunning, but the story of someone who did not run because she was not made that way and because some part of her understood, even in the moment of encounter, that the thing at the edge of her yard was something she had the right to address. She heard the chain the way everyone hears the chain, at the boundary of consciousness, the sound arriving in the body before the mind has organized itself around it. She was in her yard. It was not the road. It was the edge of her land, where the breadfruit tree's roots go deep and the grass stops and the wild begins. The fire eyes at the boundary, steady, looking at her, or looking at her yard, or simply being there with the quality of presence that is neither looking nor not looking, but something that older traditions than ours would call witnessing. She did not run. She will tell you, when she tells this story, that she thought about running, but only in the way you think about an option that your body has already declined. She was already moving toward the thing, not away from it. And when she understood that she was moving toward it, she didn't stop herself. She had her penknife. She was a woman who carried a penknife, which in the Duppy tradition is not merely practical but significant, iron being what iron is in the protection vocabulary of the tradition. She opened it, and she drove it into the ground at the edge of her yard, into the soil between her land and whatever lay beyond, with a force and a finality that was a statement. The knife in the earth is a declaration. It says, this is the boundary. It says, the living have claimed this ground. It says, the iron that belonged to one purpose now belongs to another, and that belonging is mine to assign. The people who heard her tell this story said that the voice she used when she spoke, and she did speak. She spoke to the thing at the edge of her yard. She addressed it directly in the way that the most serious practitioners of the tradition sometimes do, neither with deference nor with aggression, but with a kind of level authority. That voice was not quite her ordinary voice. Not possessed, not overtaken, nothing dramatic in the way that drama is usually performed, but different in the way that a person is different when they are speaking from the deepest layer of themselves, from the layer that is below personality and below acquired behavior and below everything that daily life deposits on top of the self. From somewhere older, she spoke, and the words are not preserved in the telling. People say she did not repeat what she said, and this is consistent with certain traditions in which the specific words of a spiritual address are not for repetition in ordinary context, and the fire eyes held still the way a held still thing holds still when a decision is being made about it. And then, slowly, the tradition is specific about the slowness, the particular slowness of a departure that is also a concession. The fire eyes withdrew. Back into the dark. Back into whatever the dark contains that the day does not. And the chain sound grew quieter and quieter, and was replaced again by the tree frogs. And the woman stood in her yard with the penknife in the ground, and she stayed there until she was sure. Then she pulled the knife from the earth, and she went inside, and she boiled herself some chocolate tea, and she sat with it in the dark of her kitchen until the morning came. And she never told anyone what she said to it, only that she said something, and that it hurt her, and that she was glad she had not run. And then there is the third story, the one that is told more quietly than the others, because this one does not end with the man walking away. He is found in the road at dawn by the first people traveling to market, which is to say he is found by the people who are always first on the road, the people whose day begins in the dark because the market cannot wait, and they find him lying in the road not dead. Not dead, this matters, but in a state that is not quite the state of a living person in the ordinary sense. He is breathing. He is not injured, not visibly, not in any way that the body shows on the outside. But he is somewhere else. He is not on that road, in that body, in that morning with those people trying to rouse him. He is somewhere else, and getting him back from that somewhere else takes time. They carry him home. They do what is done. The bush medicine people come. The prayers are said. The specific protocols of the tradition are applied, and after 3 days he begins to come back. After 3 days he can speak. He will not describe what he saw. He tries, twice, and both times stops himself. And the people who are there say that the stopping is not because he lacks words, but because the words, when he reaches for them, seem to him insufficient, seem to him to be the wrong tool for the thing he is trying to carry, and that the second time he tries and stops, there is something in his face that tells them not to ask again. He says only this, and it is what the tradition preserves, that he looked into the fire eyes, that he looked directly into them, which the tradition says you should not do, and that what he saw there was not simply fire, that he would not say what it was, but that he had seen it, and it had seen him, and that whatever the looking exchanged between them, he would carry for the rest of his life, and he would rather carry it in silence than give it the shape of words, which might make it more real in the daylight than he could bear it to be. He lived another 30 years after that night. People who knew him said he was a different quality of person after. Not broken, Not hollowed out in the way that some encounters with the terrible hollow people out, but quieter, more careful, more specifically and genuinely attentive to other people's suffering in the way that a person is attentive when they have some clear and irreducible knowledge of what suffering actually costs. He was not a frightened man. He was a man who had learned something that most people only learn when they have no more time to use the knowledge, and he was using it, quietly, every day. Now, you have heard the chain on the road. You have heard these stories. Let me tell you what you know. If you are Jamaican and you have grown up with this tradition in your bones, what you know to do. Because the rolling calf tradition is not only a tradition of fear, it is also a tradition of survival. And the survival knowledge is as old and as carefully maintained as the fear knowledge, and both of them deserve the full attention that I am asking you to give them. You lie flat. You get off the road, and you get as low as the earth will allow you to go, and you stay there. The humility of this is not incidental. This is a tradition that understands the spiritual and practical dimensions of making yourself small in the presence of something that is drawn to the upright, to the proud, to the person who stands in the road and says, I do not believe in this, and therefore I will not move. The rolling calf is drawn to that person. That is what the folk stories demonstrate over and over again. The man who stands in the road because he is too proud to run is the man who is found in the road at dawn. Get low. Press your face into the earth. Make yourself humble in the most literal, physical sense of that word. Humus, the ground, the dirt. You are returning to the earth temporarily to avoid becoming part of it permanently. You throw your clothing. This is Anansi's principle. Misdirection, redirection. The use of the pursuer's own momentum against itself. The rolling calf follows scent, follows the trace of human presence, and your clothing carries that trace. The shirt goes one way, you go another. This is not a complicated strategy. It is a brilliant one, because it requires nothing you do not already have. It requires only the presence of mind, in the full extremity of fear, to remember that you have a shirt and that the shirt can become a decoy. The trickster tradition, Anansi and his descendants, all the folk heroes who survive not through strength, but through wit, and the Duppy tradition are not separate bodies of Jamaican cultural wisdom. They are drawing from the same well. They are both saying, you may not be as strong as the thing coming for you. You may not be able to outrun it, but you can outthink it, and outthinking it is enough. You drop things behind you. Grains of rice, if you have them. Sand. Small objects that can be counted. Because the rolling calf, and this detail appears in vampire folklore from Central Europe, in spirit trap traditions from across Africa, in versions of spiritual protection so geographically dispersed that its presence in so many places suggests something very old and very deep about how human beings understand dangerous supernatural entities. The rolling calf is compelled to stop and count them, cannot pass them by, cannot resist the enumeration. This is not presented in the tradition as funny, though there is a dark humor in it. The most terrifying creature in Jamaican folklore, stopped dead in the road by a handful of rice, counting in the dark while you get away. The tradition is telling you something through this detail. It is telling you that no dangerous thing, however powerful, is without its constraint. That the thing that makes it powerful is also the thing that makes it stoppable, if you know what that thing is. The rolling calf's power comes from its relentlessness, its inability to be distracted or deflected. But that same quality, that compulsive focus, is also its vulnerability. The tradition is teaching you to find the vulnerability in the power. That is not a small lesson. You drive the penknife into the ground. Iron. The iron that the rolling calf drags behind it. That same material, in the hands of the living, becomes protective. The tradition is specific about this. Iron driven into the earth by a living hand, with living intention, with the specific quality of decision that makes an act a statement rather than a gesture. The blade in the earth says, here is where I stand. Here is the line I am drawing. Here is the material that your own tradition has given meaning to, and I am using it. The iron crosses, the iron blades, the iron in the protection rituals. There is a historical dimension to this that the tradition carries without spelling out, because the tradition rarely spells things out directly. Iron was the material of the chain. Iron was the material of the ankle cuff and the collar and the manacle. And now iron in the hands of the living person is the material of protection, of boundary, of the definitive no. The transmutation of the instrument of bondage into the instrument of freedom. This is not coincidental. This is the tradition doing what the tradition always does, which is finding the resource in the very place the oppression thought it had left no resources. You carry vervain. This is the herbal dimension of the protection tradition, the plant knowledge that is one of the great under-acknowledged legacies of the African and indigenous Caribbean people who survived the Middle Passage and the plantation by knowing, intimately and precisely, what the land could provide and what specific plants could do in the specific context that the life they were forced to live required. Vervain is a real plant with documented properties. It is used across traditions, European, African, Caribbean, Indigenous American, with a consistency that suggests the knowledge of it is not borrowed from any one tradition, but emerged independently in multiple places from careful attention to what the plant actually does. In the Jamaican Duppy tradition, it is carried as protection, tucked in a pocket or tied at the wrist, its presence declaring the carrier's connection to the living world of plants, to the knowledge of the earth, to the long line of people who knew what to do in the dark because they had paid careful attention to the light. The tarred stick in the left hand. The left hand, the non-dominant hand in most people, carries a specific significance in many spiritual traditions as the hand that is closer to the spirit world, more receptive, more open to what the dominant hand manages by grasping and controlling. The tar has protective properties in the tradition, another substance, like iron, that has been given meaning by accumulated use and accumulated knowledge. The left hand holds it, not the writing hand, not the working hand, the other one. The one that is not trying to control anything. The one that is simply carrying the protection, open to the guidance of whatever in you knows how to navigate the space between the living and the dead. And the crossroads itself, as I said before, which can protect you by offering the thing that pursues you too many directions at once, by creating the liminal confusion that even the most determined spirit cannot always resolve. You reach the crossroads and you stand in the center of it, and the rolling calf arrives at the crossroads and finds 4 roads where you have gone and cannot determine which one you took, or cannot enter the space at all, or is briefly, critically, stopped. And the crossroads buys you time, and time is what you need. Now look at all of these protections together. Look at them as a system. Look at what they require of you, and what they teach you about surviving the encounter with concentrated embodied wickedness. Every single one of them requires that you do not lose yourself to fear. That is not a coincidence. Every single protection in the rolling calf tradition, lying flat, throwing the clothing, dropping the rice, driving the penknife, carrying the herb, holding the stick, requires that you think, that your mind, even in the extremity of genuine terror, continues to function, that you do not dissolve into pure animal panic, which is the panic that has no strategy and no knowledge in it, the panic that runs until it cannot run and then simply falls. You have to think. You have to remember the story. You have to do, in the specific sequence and with the specific intentions that the tradition has encoded, the things the tradition tells you to do. And if you manage that, if you keep your mind in the presence of the thing that has been specifically designed, by its own nature and its own history, to make you lose your mind, you survive. This is not a coincidental lesson for a people who lived for generations inside a system that was specifically and deliberately designed to destroy the mind's capacity for self-possession. The plantation's most essential technology was not the chain. It was fear. The fear that preceded the chain, that made the chain almost unnecessary because the fear was already doing the work. The fear that operated in the dark, that the curfew enforced, that the sound of hooves on the night road delivered, that the knowledge of what happened to those who resisted delivered. That fear, if it succeeded, produced people who could not think in extremity. People who, when the danger came, dissolved into the panic that had no strategy in it. The rolling calf tradition, and I am not speculating here. I am reading the tradition in the way that the tradition invites serious readers to read it. The rolling calf tradition is teaching the specific antidote to the specific poison. The antidote to the fear that destroys the mind is, remember the story. Use the knowledge. Keep your mind. The thing coming for you is terrifying. Keep your mind anyway. Because your mind, if you keep it, is the thing that saves you. Let me talk about what the rolling calf does for a community that lives with it. Not what it does to you when you encounter it on the road at 2 in the morning. What it does for the community that keeps the story alive, that tells it across generations, that maintains the knowledge of the protections and the geography and the specific moral accounting that the tradition performs. Think about what it means to live in a world where the powerful man, the cruel one, the one who tormented the powerless, the one who used his position to harm those who had no recourse against him, very often dies in his own bed, surrounded by his own people, mourned by those who benefited from his cruelty and will remember him as a hard man but a good provider, a strict man but a man of his time. Think about what it means to be one of the people he harmed, to sit with your harm while he dies peacefully, to watch the world fail to organize itself around the moral truth of what he did. The court does not reach him. The law was his. The institutional mechanisms of accountability were built by people like him, for people like him, and they work the way they were designed to work, which is to protect people like him from the consequences that people like him deserve. And then the rolling calf. The tradition that says, he will not rest. He cannot rest. The specific quality of what he was, the cruelty, the pleasure in domination, the burning of other people's lives for his own warmth. That quality does not go away when the body stops. It becomes his form. It becomes his eternity. He walks the roads he made dangerous with fire in his eyes and iron dragging behind him, and no peace, no rest, no arrival, no end point, no moment where the chain grows lighter or the fire dims or the dark road becomes anything other than what it is. He drags his chain forever on the roads that remember him, and the people who walk those roads know, without seeing him, without needing to see him, that the road remembers what he was and has made him into what he deserved. This knowledge, the knowledge that moral consequence is real even when human institutions fail to deliver it, is not a small thing. Please hear me when I say this. It is not superstition. It is not false comfort. It is not the simple fairy tale of a people who needed to believe in justice because justice was not available. It is something more serious and more necessary than any of those reductions suggest. It is genuine spiritual infrastructure, a community that maintains, across centuries and across the sustained assault of systems designed to strip it of everything including the belief that its moral perceptions matter. A community that maintains the knowledge that wickedness carries its own consequence, that the powerful man is not actually free of what he did just because his body ended, that the road will have him eventually. That community has something that the people who built the system that oppressed them did not want it to have. It has a moral cosmology that does not depend on the oppressor's institutions for its validation. It has its own accounting. It runs its own ledger. And the ledger says, what you owe does not disappear. The debt survives the debtor. It comes back in chains on the country road, and the people who walk that road know it, and the knowing is not nothing. The knowing is everything. And the rolling calf stories are still being told. Let me be clear about this. They are not museum pieces, not relics preserved in amber for academic study, not stories that Jamaicans tell the tourists with a knowing smile and a rum punch. They are still alive in the specific way that living things are alive, changing slightly as they move through time, taking on new containers while keeping their essential content, finding new roads to haunt while carrying the memory of the old ones. In Jamaican churches, where the relationship between the Christian tradition and the older traditions is never as simple as either the church or the older tradition would prefer it to be, the rolling calf gets reframed in Christian theological language. The Duppy becomes the damned soul. The chain becomes the chain of sin that the unrepentant carry into eternity. But the story is the same story. The form is the same form. The road is the same road. The chain is the same chain. On community WhatsApp groups. And if you have not been in a Jamaican community WhatsApp group, you are missing a particular and irreplaceable form of collective oral tradition conducted at extraordinary speed via mobile phone. The rolling calf appears in the comments when someone posts a strange encounter, a near miss on a country road, an experience at night that does not resolve into ordinary explanation. Not always with full credulity. Jamaicans are not a credulous people, but with a particular quality of engagement that is not quite belief and not quite dismissal, and lives between those two positions in the space that serious, lived folk tradition always occupies, the space that says, I am not sure what I believe about the specifics, but I know what the story is doing, and the story is doing something real. The specific roads in Jamaica that are known as rolling calf roads, the roads with particular histories, the roads where something happened that the community's memory has encoded into the landscape itself. Those roads are still avoided after dark by people who will tell you they do not believe in Duppies, who will tell you they are modern, educated, skeptical people, and who will then tell you, if you ask the right way and have earned a certain quality of trust, which route they took home last night and why. The route that did not go past that particular stretch of road. The route that added 15 minutes to the journey, but was worth it. The route that their grandmother told them to take, and that they have always taken because some knowledges you maintain, even when you cannot fully articulate the reason you maintain them. This is not superstition. I want to say this again, clearly and without qualification, because the word superstition has been used for a long time to dismiss the encoded knowledge of specific communities by people who did not want to engage with what that knowledge was actually doing. This is a sophisticated community practice of encoding historical knowledge, moral knowledge, geographical knowledge, and survival knowledge in narrative form, and maintaining it across generations through the specific technology of the story told in the dark. The story that travels in the body, that enters through the ear and lodges in the place below conscious thought, that activates when the right conditions arise, the dark road, the unfamiliar sound, the particular quality of late Jamaican night that is not quite like any other night anywhere else in the world. The story is the delivery mechanism for a knowledge that the community has decided is worth keeping. The rolling calf is the keeper of that knowledge, and the keeper takes the form that ensures you will not forget you were told. Let me close on the road. The long country road through the cane fields, or through what used to be cane fields, some of them, the ones that have gone to bush and wild growing things since the economics of sugar changed and the land was left to its own remembering. The road at dawn, not at 2 in the morning, not in the full dark of the rolling calf's hour, but at dawn, when the first light comes over the hills in the east and moves across the country like something patient and reliable and absolutely determined to show up every morning no matter what the night contained. The tree frogs are gone quiet. That is the first thing you notice at dawn after a long night. The tree frogs stop, and the silence they leave behind is a different kind of silence than the silence before they started, a silence that has been earned through all those hours of sound, and that holds in it something of the night it has replaced. The cane is still, or nearly still. The road is visible again. You can see it, actually see it, the asphalt gray-blue in the early light, the verge growing green on either side. And if you know how to look, if you have been given the tradition and carry it in the way it is meant to be carried, you can read the road, the drag marks, the specific trace that a heavy chain leaves on asphalt when it has been drawn across it throughout a long night. Not always visible, not always legible to people who have not been taught to look for them, but there, in certain lights, on certain mornings, on certain roads that the tradition has named, the mark of iron on stone. The evidence that something moved through here in the hours the light was absent. The record that the road keeps of its own night traffic. The old people say you can feel the specific quality of the silence on a road that something has recently moved through. That the air is different, not colder, or not only colder, but different in a way that the body reads before the mind has its say about it. A quality of recent presence. An absence that is structured rather than simple. An absence shaped by what occupied the space before the absence began. Like the silence left in a room after a long argument has ended and the people have gone. Not neutral, not empty, charged with what it has contained. And somewhere below the horizon now, somewhere below the reach of the morning light that has done its reliable work of displacing everything that belongs to the night, somewhere in the dark that the day has temporarily, provisionally, until tonight displaced, the rolling calf goes on, dragging its chain on roads that are not yet lit, moving through the country dark that is not yet reached by the sun's progression across the island. The fire that does not go out, the debt that does not clear, the justice that looks nothing like justice in the courtrooms and the textbooks and the theological treatises, but that is justice nonetheless. Exact, relentless, fitting the crime with a specificity that no human court has ever managed to achieve, making of the criminal exactly what the criminal made of themselves, no more and no less, and placing them in the landscape where their crimes were committed to where their punishment for as long as the debt is owed. And the old people say, the debt is never paid. They say it without drama. They say it the way you say something that is simply, finally, unambiguously true, with the flat authority of a person who has no stake in the answer being otherwise. The debt is never paid. The rolling calf goes on. Tonight it will be on the road. Tomorrow night. Every night after that. Dragging the chain. Wearing the fire. Moving through the dark that the day has not yet reached and cannot permanently reach, and has been trying to reach since the first morning on this island, and will be trying still when we are all gone from it. So you go home. If you are the one on the road at 2 in the morning who has heard the chain and has used the knowledge and has survived the encounter and is now upright and moving in the first gray light of the morning toward the house, toward the yard, toward the door, you go home. You do not go back to the road to look for it. You do not tell the story tonight in a way that might invite demonstration. You leave the rolling calf to its chain and its fire and its eternal obligation on the road that remembers it, and you go inside, and you close the door, and you are grateful. Specifically, genuinely, profoundly grateful, not in the abstract way of a person who has escaped a generic danger, but in the particular way of a person who knows exactly what came for them and exactly what kept them, and who has enough respect for both the danger and the knowledge to hold that gratitude in their body for the rest of their life and act accordingly. The knowledge kept you. The old people's knowledge. The grandmother's story, told in the afternoon under the breadfruit tree when you were small and thought you were learning a story and were actually being given a tool. The knowledge that traveled through generations in the specific form of a story told in the dark, preserved because the people who preserved it understood, as clearly and as practically as they understood anything, that knowing what to do when the chain sounds on the road is the difference between the man who walks home and the man who is found in the road at dawn with 3 days of silence in front of him and something in his eyes that he will never put into words. Honor the knowledge. That is the only instruction the rolling calf tradition ultimately offers. Honor the knowledge by keeping it. Keep it by telling it. Tell it the way the old people told it, with full attention to the darkness and what it contains, and full respect for the intelligence of the person you are telling it to. They deserve the whole story. They always did. The road waits for the night. The night will come, as it has always come, as it will always come, over the hills of St. Elizabeth and Clarendon and Portland and everywhere on this island where the ground holds more than the daylight shows. The tree frogs will start their chorus. The cane fields will begin their conversation with the wind. The last car will pass, going the other direction, and then there will be no more cars. And then the road will be what the road is in the dark, what it has always been in the dark, what it will be in the dark long after every living person who has heard this story is gone. And on that road, as reliable as the darkness itself, as inevitable as the morning that will follow it, the chain will sound. Iron on asphalt, iron on stone, the drag and clank of it moving through the night toward whatever it is moving toward, carrying whatever it will always carry, paying whatever it will always owe. You know what it is now. You know where it comes from and what it is made of and what it means and what to do if you hear it coming. That knowledge is yours. It was always yours. It has been waiting for you in the story since before you were born, held there by the people who understood that a story is not entertainment. It is survival, wrapped in the only form that survival can take when it has to travel across generations in the dark, in the mouths of people who have nothing but their knowledge and their voice and their absolute refusal to let the knowing die. The rolling calf goes on, and so do you. That is the whole of it. That is enough. If you've ever heard or seen it rolling calf, let me know in the comment section. Like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you can relate.